Hi, welcome back. I'm Jerrel, and this is my development studio, Sungrand. Today I'm going to share a bit of Breath of Thunder with you. I've had people asking about the battle system, the battle mechanics of Breath of Thunder, and I'm going to share that with you. I'll show you my Eventide framework, which I use to develop RPGs. So I've spent years developing Eventide framework, which uses Unity, and it allows me to make any RPG that I can think of, mechanically, technically, and in terms of the battle mechanics, it's designed to be able to allow the player to do some very creative stuff. So I'm going to share the process with you now. So I've got my folder for attacks here. In Unity, I would go create, Eventide RPG, combat action, and I can have basic actions, magic actions, and skill actions. That way I can group them into different, say, option windows in your character's action menu. You can have your magic and your skill. So if we look at our basic attack here, we have a description. We can put a name in there, and we define: is it usable in battle? Is it usable in the world? And can the action be inherited? This was for a game that I was developing for the 3DS, but unfortunately there were significant memory leaks with Unity on 3DS, and I had to cancel that game because I believed that eventually, Unity would be able to fix the memory leak. So I waited. I held on to this game for years, and I said, okay, well, I'd like to make this game, but it crashes because of memory leaks. And unfortunately, the memory leaks couldn't be addressed. But in that previous game, if your characters, there was permadeath. So if your characters were killed, other characters could inherit skills and traits from other characters that died. So that won't be used in Breath of Thunder. There's no permadeath in Breath of Thunder. You can choose what the damage is calculated by. So any of the stats that you define in the game engine, not the game engine, the framework, you can say if it's, this could be calculated by weight or speed or reflex or luck. So this can cost your character HP, it can hurt your character MP, SP if you want to implement some sort of special meter, say for example like a limit break or what have you. You could have that be a percentage instead of a flat value, and you can say if it's long ranged. There's a lot that around here that can get a little bit, it's all just tick boxes at the end of the day. But you can target all the combatants. You can forcefully target multiple targets. This is an option. If you keep toggling through it, eventually, how you can target one enemy with a magic spell or hit all the enemies with that. So what you can actually have it do is open another menu, a secondary menu. You can change target attention. So when it hits an enemy, you can force that enemy to, I suppose in some games they call it aggro, where you can force it to target the user. But also, you can force the enemy to target itself. You can force the enemy to target randomly one of its team members. You can force it to randomly target one of your party members. You can force it to target pet or summon. There is room in my framework for pets and summons as well. So there's an action occurrence list, and this is where the actual stuff happens. I'll show you an example of what an action occurrence is. So the action effect modifier is 1. That's basically 100%, and the action time delay. So your character performs their animation after 0.75 seconds. This action occurs. It can specify the accuracy. It can trigger any kind of status conditions. I don't want any in there. And camera instruction. And that allows me to make battles feel exciting and cinematic because I can forcefully control the camera and make it look really cool. So if we go to attack times 2, we'll see something different here in the occurrence list. It's the same situation, but it now hits twice. And if we go up to attack times 4, you'll see that there are 4 action occurrences in there. And you can see that it is split up. So it's only doing 40% of the actual hit, but 4 times 4 is 16. So you're really doing 1.6 times the amount of damage, but it looks cool. I'm going to admit, I'm a sucker for when RPGs let your characters hit multiple times. There's just something really cool about it. Whether it's Final Fantasy or Pokemon, it doesn't matter if your character's doing less damage. When they hit multiple times, I think it's really cool. So I'll clamp down on the camera instructions there. So I'll try to get more into the weeds here. You can affect the user's stats. You can make your power go up or down. You know, if you want to pause it and look at it, you can kind of see what the deal is there. So we have the action, the elemental alignment. You can change how the character aligns with other elements. The UI on that is very basic, so it's kind of boring to explain that to you at the moment. You can add a character to the battle. So I'll bring that up, and a lot of these are placeholders, or not placeholders, but actually data left over from my previous project. But say, like, for example, there's a character that you normally, like a summon or whatnot. So you select a summon, and then you can say that the character is summoned, and there are, I think I've actually programmed 2 positions for summons, a front position and rear position. Just as a quick dirty way to implement that, I put a tick box in there. But if I were to update this, I would just put a drop-down menu, and then you can select it from the drop-down menu. So you can transform the user as well. You can implement transformations, so you can pick whatever character from the database that you want. You can have the transformation stay active. You can have it end after battle. Now, you can have events trigger. So you can have battle events, and that's where characters can, talk. They can have a dialogue. You can have this action trigger an event. So there's so many complex things because now you've reached into the other aspect of the game, which is running events. You can have conditions to activate. So I'll go ahead and just say, for example, put that at 1. And you can give yourself a status condition. So say, for example, you're brave, you're blind. So maybe you have something called, blind rage strike, or something to that effect. And your character does like 500 times, or like 5 times the normal amount of damage, 500% damage. Your character does a big hit, and maybe it inflicts the enemy with blind because it hits them so hard, but you've gone into a blind range that now you yourself are inflicted with blind. So let's say that, okay? Now your character's been afflicted with blind. So that is rough, but let's say you equip your character with an item and they have a trait. So let's go ahead and just have a look at traits that are connected to that item. I hope I didn't change anything that I wasn't supposed to there. Uh-oh, I better put that back at 0. So let's say that your character uses blind rage and they blind themselves. So we'll go ahead and shrink that down and we'll look at traits. You can activate traits by either equipping an item, or you can have a character learn it through doing, a quest during the game, and they can permanently gain a trait. Those are passive traits. And let's say, like, I have feral rage here, but I'll go ahead and just use this as an example. Let's say, let's just create a new one then. So let's go trait. Okay. Let's see. How about this? Use the force, okay? How about that? The name of that is Use the Force. Use the Force. And then the trait description will be perfect accuracy when blind, and power plus 20%. Okay, so now, okay, so let's see. We have trait modifier, power. That headers is wrong. I should say stats, but that's okay. So I will go ahead and just say 20. There we go. And let's see. And how we would activate that is, let's see, we have combat actions that can activate and give your character different traits and abilities. You can have different stats as well. So this would actually, you would connect that through all sorts of different ways, but I'll show you some other things you can do here. A status power on weapon. So you can actually have your power change. So I would create, let's see, blind isn't in here. It's not, oh, here it is. Status power. Actually, yeah, actually you should do it, you would do it that way. 0.2, there we go. But actually that is just a flat value. That one's a flat value, and the bottom one is percentages. So when the character has that, when they're blinded, they have 20% boost. You can have your character be have resistances to those. Let's see, their weapon proficiency can increase. So let's say, just as a fun quirk, it's fun to have hidden mechanics. It actually also increases your barehanded ability to fight by 50% as well. So if you knew that you had this set up, so you set up your equipment, you have an item that gives your character the use the force trait. So now when that character is blinded, they get a 20% boost, and they get a 50% boost when they're barehanded, and you now can make yourself blind at any time that you want because you have an ability, you have a combat action, called blind rage attack or whatever it's called, and that does massive damage to the enemy. It blinds the user, which obviously is a bad thing, but you equip this item that lets you use the force, and that boosts that. And then I would just need to find where I put the stat for boosting accuracy, but it's in there. So yeah, so that's sort of what you can do with the traits and the actions. So let's have a look at a couple more actions here. So these open up menus and whatnot. I'm a sucker for counterattack stuff. It really started with Breath of Fire on the Super Nintendo, when characters, like, at that point, that was my first turn-based RPG, and so when I saw characters counterattack, like just start counterattacking, I was thinking, like, that's so cool. How do you? I get a free attack. How do you even get to do that? So let's just have a look at double riposte. A quick counterattack, which is twice. That's already wish fulfillment. I'm going to admit, when it comes to making RPGs, it's basically wish fulfillment for me. Both hits do 45% damage, but you add that up, and it's a little less, but it looks cool, than a standard attack. Whereas the normal counterattack, like counter tackle, does only 35% of a standard attack, because I want to be able to see empirically how much is this doing compared to a character's normal attack. So counter claw is for animals and whatnot, but you can have it ignore defense calculation. So how each character works in Breath of Thunder is that they have access to a unique set of elemental abilities, and the game will lean very heavily into elemental resistances and strengths. Someone asked if you're just going to be mashing the attack button over and over again, and if so, they're not interested. I don't like games where you just mash the attack button over and over again. It's a little bit different if it's a game that I grew up with, because I like the game for different reasons, but when it comes to playing a new game, I personally expect more. So that's why I'm leaning into this mechanical, I wouldn't say it's overly complex, but there's depth to it. It lets you create a team that works a way that you want. There's some personalization for you there. What is hyperactive? What is that? Oh, it gives yourself... Oh, cool. This is a trait called hyperactive. If your character has hyperactive, they gain echo at the start of combat. And echo is a status condition that when you cast a magic spell, it happens twice. Oh, hold on, wait. That's a different status condition. This status condition reduce your magic cost by 25%. But I've got something like a double in there that actually causes your magic to cast twice, that sort of thing. So I'll just go over some characters. I'll share some of the characters here with you. So here are my characters. And I'll leave it there. I think that's a whole lot to share in one day. I don't want to bore you. There's you can do basically anything. You can give yourself stage. You can give yourself status conditions. You can change your elemental, alignments for defense and offense and all of that stuff. Let's see here. So if we have a look, it's heroes, the first character we play as. So here's where we go. You have your stats. I'll show you how that looks. You can specify your starting and your ending point. I could program a system that lets you have a curve there, but at the moment I don't really need that for a game. So you can for this framework, you can create as many different weapon types as you want, and then you can specify whether or not they're able to equip them. And then there are weapon proficiencies. So let's say a character is able to equip multiple types of weapons. You can say that, well, he's better with a sword, so he'll have like 130% power with a sword, whereas with maybe with an axe, he's not that good at an axe. That's just an example of what you can do with these characters. You can also define what sort of shield types they can use. You can define multiple kinds of shield types and all that. Let's see. Every character is going to have their own unique stat spread when it comes to their elemental offense and defense. So some characters are just going to be naturally weaker. They're going to take more damage from certain elements, and they'll deal significantly more damage with certain elements. You'll be able to find items called Echo Stones, and Echo Stones will grant you, if you equip them, you'll have temporary access to certain magic and abilities, but only certain characters can use Echo Stones. And that's the storyline characters. The 10 main characters can use Echo Stones. The optional, there's 8 optional characters. They are not able to use Echo Stones, and there's a storyline reason for that. Your characters can have natural immunity to certain stats conditions, and I love this kind of depth to that sort of system. So let's say your character. So that's a status condition called burn, right? And I already showed a little bit with the other deal, sort of like with use the force. But what if your character had, let's create a new trait here. What if you had a trait called Feel the Burn? Okay, and so when your character is burned, go ahead and open that. Oh, let's see here. Hold on. I've caused something to happen here. Oh, I have to fix something here. But you can have it to where when they're burned, they get like a 40-50% boost to their power, to their attack power, something like that. Yeah, something like that. And let's see here. I'm not sure if I've shown you equipment. There's so much you can do with equipment as well. I'll just open up equipment a little bit, and I'll give you a quick rundown. I'm not sure how long the video is doing. Actually, I might go ahead and save that for another video. Yeah. So, you're going to go into battles where enemies have significant differences when it comes to the elements that they are weak to, what they are strong to, and you will also have weapon type resistances as well. So certain enemies will be significantly weaker to certain weapon types. Certain enemies will enter a state where they have what's called a fatal strike, and a fatal strike, they enter a different pose, and the game will say, okay, the enemy has started, preparing a fatal strike. Let me see here. Where's my blob guy? Here's my battle blob guy. So the game will say the enemy has entered a fatal strike. So you need to hit that enemy with either a weapon or an element that they are weak to. And if you don't do that, if you don't hit the enemy with their weakness, so they're going to take significantly less damage from anything that is not one of their weaknesses. So now they're taking much less damage from everything else, and you have until their next turn to knock them out of their fatal strike. And if you do not stop them, they'll perform a fatal strike, and it'll do significant damage. So that's part of the fun of the battle system is something like that, it can get annoying. I do understand something like that can get annoying because you're constantly, trying to respond to whatever the enemy's doing. So not every enemy has access to Fatal Strike, but I would say a good number, enough enemies have a Fatal Strike to where if you're just mashing the attack button, you're probably going to get killed. Because of elemental resistances, you're going to waste a lot of time. If you defeat an enemy using one of its weaknesses, then that enemy will drop items which you can use for, there's going to be, a degree of crafting in terms of, how I mentioned, you'll be able to equip items and Echo Stones. Echo Stones give you access to different magic. You have equipment. You have accessories that can give characters different traits, as you can see, like use the Force and whatnot. You can either find those, which are pretty rare in the wild, or you can use enemy parts and you can create them. And you get enemy parts by defeating them with elements that they're weak to. So those are all supplemental to the experience. If you want to just attack, mash the attack button, you can, but the game's not going to be fun. But the game will constantly invite you to explore these deeper mechanics. So that's just some of what's going on in terms of the battle system. It's quite complex. You can see it's not just mashing the attack button. I'm not a fan of that. It really turns me off when it comes to newer RPGs. But also being overly complex, where you have to have a PhD, also is something that really discourages me when I start playing a modern RPG. I'll tell you, one of my favorite modern RPGs that I've played was Dragon Ball Fusions on the 3DS. I recently got to play that. I've wanted to play it for years, but I've been so busy with work. I played that, and it isn't overly complex, but it's not overly simple as well. It was very much about, strategy and spacing. And I just had a lot of fun playing Dragon Ball Fusions. So, I hope you thought that was interesting. I know for a lot of people, this sort of stuff is probably just a little too text heavy. I'm showing all the back end, but for some people they might find this interesting. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll share more information with you soon. So okay, thank you, take care, and if you are interested in backing the project, I'll put the link to the Kickstarter project for Breath of Thunder. Thanks everyone, take care.